Hi, and welcome to Series 8 of our podcast series. So, this week we'll be covering three key topics: Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And today we're going to be talking on our Mondays, our supply chain shift, and that's one of the things we're going to be concentrating today. We talk a lot about shifts within geopolitics and everything around there, and challenges that lots of countries have faced over the last few years now, and certainly as I've been heavily involved, from training to advice to doing lots of things. The challenges lots of companies face, not just here in the UK, internationally as well, working with the ICC. So I've seen this happen. I've seen a lot of challenges for companies, and China has always been, in my eyes, and ever since I was in, having a logistics company in 1997. China's always been the place to go to. It's always had that involvement, and it's been growing and growing and growing, and people have come very dependent on it. I just want to talk a little bit about China and what we're seeing. I don't think personally that China will change too much. I think there'll be a lot of challenges there, but I think China has the resources to be able to withstand. There'll be challenges there, like there is headwind with lots of other things like US, Europe, UK. That's global trade for you. So we're going to cover a couple of the key areas today. One of the things to talk about, what I wanted to discuss, is that dependency. A lot of companies have had very strong dependency on China over the years, and it's worked very well. And then obviously, as challenges within global trade has become more challenging, because the whole idea of global trade is to help countries around the world and help consumers and help countries develop, either through exporting or importing and looking after the consumers. So whether it's food, whether it's wood, whether it's aluminium, whether it's steel that you need in your manufacturing, all these key areas. But it comes with a challenge, because as countries evolve and as they start to try to expand themselves, they're dependent on lots of things within that. And today we're going to talk about your supply chain. Not do you import from China and that's it. It's all about your supply chain. So are you exposed to the risk? So again, breaking trade shift, tariffs. We've seen a lot of challenges with tariffs now, particularly if you're importing goods in your raw material and you're making, you're bringing aluminium, steel, and all sorts of other things in, and you bring it in and you add it in into your products as a manufacturer, and big markets are like China, US, EU, and all these challenges. And then all of a sudden, we've got all these trade barriers in the US that have come into effect with Section 232, which were covered on last Monday's podcast. But also, then you've got the EU with CBAM, so you've got the carbon border adjustment mechanism. It's a whole protection within, whether we like it or not. Like I said, I'm not into politics or anything, but you can clearly see countries are beginning to have more control in what they do, and that whether that's good or bad. I don't know what the answer is to that. We'll have to just wait and see what happens. There's probably people above me who think they know best, and that's why they're in the jobs they're in. But there is a bit of a challenge there. So geopolitical pressure. Try saying that all in one word as you're talking. It's quite comical. So geopolitics, obviously huge challenges. As I told you, how do you control that? How do you control waking up the next morning and finding out, that I don't know, the US has tweeted or put something on things, said he's going to now put charges up by an extra 10%. How do you withstand that kind of challenge? It's very hard to plan, in your strategy. So again, it's thinking about that. Supply chain, the single country dependencies, the liabilities we've seen. We talked about this. Yes, China's a great market, but don't be so dependent on it. Have a look and see what resources are out there. And rising landing cost. What do we mean by landing cost? Because again, I was actually watching a video the other day. It was on a YouTube. It was somebody explaining a new platform that's come out, and it was pretty dreadful, if I'm being pretty honest. There was no real explanation. So when I talk about these things, it's very important I clearly explain what they are. So when we say rising landing costs, we mean the cost to bring them goods in. And in that, you'll have obviously more expense because the product's gone up, because it's more expensive for that country then to supply. So there's more cost there with employment and all things around there, legislation, and probably then extra charges within legislation within the country they're in. On top of that, you've got your freight routes, so your freights are getting more expensive because obviously with all the geopolitics, we can't then just sail from A to B. Now we have to go different routes, and that has a cost. And then obviously has a delay as well when things are delayed, Hormuz and things like this, where or the Panama Canal or the Suez Canal. If you have things stuck there, that has a huge effect on disruption. So again, that's another thing. And then the other key thing that we forget about is duties and costs when it actually lands into the country it's coming into. Have duties gone up? So if you think of the US is a market, overnight you can have a 25% increase in your cost. Well, if that is already on the water and it's already sailing, and then all of a sudden the US announces that overnight the rate's going to go, how would you mitigate that? So again, it's all planning and making sure you understand your supply chain. So again, did you know the China Plus One, a sourcing strategy used by global businesses? It's something I was looking at and I thought, oh, it'd be interesting just to quickly talk about it. It's very simple and I'm just going to quickly go through it. And it's reducing reliance on a single manufacturer. We've talked about this for a long time. It's very hard to change. We talk, it's easy for us to talk on the outside and say, well, you must do this and must do that. But if you've been working with a supplier in China for many years and you've got investment in there and it works, to suddenly change that shift is very difficult. Yes, you've got a cost, but if the products are of a very good quality, because what happens if you shift that to another country like India, like Vietnam, and all these other countries? What happens when the quality is not as good and your customers are expecting that quality or you're expecting it and you've waited, 40 days, 50 days to get the goods. You paid up front for the goods probably because you don't have that credit or that relationship now with the new supplier. And then it comes in. So, just be careful. Don't always wish for what you get because sometimes it can have a bit of a knock on effect. So don't listen to all the nonsense what's out there. That's certainly key. You have to work out as a company which works best for you. Whether Mr. Trump or whether Mr. I don't know, Macron, whether Mr. Starmer is telling you things, you have to do what's right for you. They will come and go, and they'll leave a legacy behind and whatever they do. But what you've got to do, you've got to work out under the geopolitics, which is new now, is how it affects your trade. So that's very important to think about. Tariffs escalation. I'm going to go through some opportunities there with tariffs. So don't always think negative. This channel is not for negativity. It's about helping you. It's about supporting you and thinking of different ideas. So I put on the global sort about changing, and we know that. But how do we change that? Vietnam, Malaysia, India, Thailand, Mexico. These are the key things we're seeing. Vietnam, Malaysia, strong manufacturing base, growing export infrastructure. Yeah, it's there. Is it going to take over China? No way. But China will always be one of the key players. India and Thailand, yes, they're growing. And within there, you'll have trade deals. So when you think Vietnam, Malaysia, as UK or other countries where the GSP and there's DCTS and there's other trading schemes that you can use to bring your goods in at a lower price because obviously it's cheaper to manufacture there. So you're not going to get it at zero duty, but you're going to get it at lower duty because that's the whole idea of it under the WTO World Trade Organization rules. India, Thailand, just think of the UK in particular. India is doing a lot of trade deals, so that allows you to bring goods in under the Indian trade deal, under the FTA, Free Trade Agreement. That allows you to bring goods in at a reduced or zero duty rate. Thailand is another area, but again, you have to do your research. You have to make sure that what they're doing, they can do. Mexico, obviously, for the US market, very big, shorter transits. Think about your transit times. If you're going to move from China, which has, always remember this, and people always forget this. Yes, China is under huge pressure, but the infrastructure in China is immense when it comes to, containers, shipping lines, and everything shipping out. India, Thailand, Vietnam, yes, they have it. Do they have the frequencies to be able to, cope with the volume of traffic that's going to be coming if everybody sources to these countries? Well, the shipping lines want to source from there. Is it an easy market? Because, there's challenges there, isn't there? So again, just think about that. Obviously, US, it makes sense. Mexico, it's on your doorstep. Less reliance on China and other markets. But again, it's not going to go away. It's going to stay there. We've spent years and years throughout my lifetime showing the advantages of buying goods from places like China, etc. And then all of a sudden, we're now going the reverse, saying, well, that's not a good idea because that affects jobs and everything. But actually, probably the last 20 odd years, we've had such a buoyant time, and now we're changing that, and you're seeing the changes in that it's getting very aggressive. It's becoming an aggressive supply chain because people are fighting or making, and China is sitting very relaxed in the background. They're probably under pressure. They're looking at BRICS. They're looking at where can they shift the next trade, to Africa and all these other countries where there's huge potential. So they're acting just as quick as you're acting. So don't always think that China just sitting there thinking that, waiting for you to change or anything. And yes, there's great opportunities. And look, Vietnam, Malaysia, India, Thailand, Mexico, there's other markets there. If you're UK, you might be looking at the EU. The EU, it's closer, it's quicker. You've got, a huge amount of trailers coming into the UK. The costs are quite high. Always remember, if you're bringing imports in from EU, the trailer costs are very expensive. They're probably double what you'd export it out. That's always been there. A lot of people don't realise that. So make sure if you are sourcing from someone like the EU, have a look at your trailer cost. You could be quite surprised at your trailer cost and what you can get inside that trailer. Does it maximize what you can get from China with the price you're paying in China, with the container price and everything else what you're bringing in? Yes, if it takes an extra 20 days, can you build that within your supply chain strategy? Can you, build that into your supply chain where and you can plan it? Again, it's very important. Don't just jump and listen to people. This whole podcast is just to go through a few things. This is more than manufacturing. Yeah, what changes? Freight routes, customs compliance changes. Origin, you get used to doing things and it works, and you're doing your documents, your customs entries, and everything around there. But all of a sudden, the knock on, you could have an exposure of duty. You could have a strategy of lead times change where you think you're buying from someone, it takes, the goods are not ready and it takes them forever to get it ready. Where there's a machine working in China, it's a machine working, they get the goods ready for you. You're used to that. Don't always assume that'll be the same in other countries you're working in. Could do, but again, check it. Make sure you do a very planned strategy when you're doing these things. And margins, you could think you're saving money or making money, and that could be eroded overnight if you haven't recalculated all the extra costs in the lead times and everything else. And how much is a container from these countries compared to China? Be interesting to see. Again, changing supply, removing risk. So many businesses move and create new exposure. And that was my whole point, you do what you think's best for you, but again, incorrect origin declarations because made in new markets. How do you know you got a relationship in China? You know the goods are China, you know it's under WTO rules, you know it's duty. It's simple. You move to a lot of these other countries who promise you, yes, it's Vietnam origin or it's Malaysia origin or whatever origin it is, and you expose to that unless you're doing key things to make sure that the origin declarations are correct. Because if they're not, you'll be hit with duty that you haven't planned for. So again, have a think about these things. Wrong commodity scores, especially for new product categories. So again, is the category still meeting the category that you're buying from China? Again, look at it. It could shift. FTA qualification errors, preferential rates not properly evidenced. So again, we see this a lot where we're working with countries, and do we understand how a free trade agreement and what you have to do to get a lower duty rate? Documentation, make sure it's certificates, origin, commercial invoice, packages. Again, working with the supplier, make sure they understand these are the key things for your supply chain. If they're not understanding the correct paperwork, they might be able to produce a product, but can they do everything? These errors can trigger audits, delays, penalties. So you can end up goods stuck at a port. And yes, it's great stuck at a port, but it's costing you demurrage every day it's there. So you could wipe out what you saved overnight with the efficiency that you've been used to. Again, we're not saying you should do it. We're just saying, look at the opportunities and what's there. What smart importers are doing, what we say, the actions that reduces risk. So best before the supply chain review. So this is all I'm saying to review, map your supply chain base, identify which product lines carry the highest China concentration, and then look at it. That's the best way I would say. Map tariffs. Look at your tariffs and what applies to any trade agreements or any free trade agreements. So when it says FTA, it's a free trade agreement. That normally means the country that you interview in the UK. It's the trade deals that the UK has adopted, like India and other countries, where Japan, where by bringing the goods in and the origin meets the criteria, you'll have it at a reduced rate, normally zero. Again, audit customs data Incoterms. Think of your Incoterms. Test alternative sourcing markets. Review Incoterms. Responsibilities, audit, all the customs data report committee. These are all we're saying to you. You can move, you can do whatever you want. But again, don't just assume China is not the place to be tomorrow. It could be the place to be for the next 10 years. Again, yes, there's challenges there. Yes, there's geopolitical issues within there. But again, is your China number one strategy trade compliant from day one? That's the key thing. Don't just move for the sake of moving, because it could be a disaster for your business. This is part of a weekly series, as you know. Monday, we've done obviously China. Wednesday, we're going to be sitting around customs and risk and compliance, why HMRC are increasing. And Friday, global trade intelligence, trade routes are changing. And also just on the, we'll have now the new trade intelligence newsletter, which we'll be doing that live. So again, you'll get the newsletter through email now or through our YouTube channel. The idea is to push everything into our channel now, so everything's there, all the resources there. You can read, you can listen, you can watch. It's entirely up to you. That's the whole principle of this. And again, it's very important to see, 3 times weekly, it'll keep you connected. It's free. We're not charging anything. All I'm asking, I need people to subscribe, because once we can get it to a level, we can do so much with this channel. We really can. And actually, it will help you enormously within your supply chain. There's a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of expertise. I've been doing this for 30 odd years. I've been doing audits. I've been doing training. I've done over 1,000 workshops around the world. I know what businesses need and don't need. I sit every day in this environment. If I can help you and help you, your supply chain, I can help you export, I can help you make profit. That to me is worth its weight in gold. And all we ask for that is you subscribe to our channel. That's all we're asking. So thanks for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you on Wednesday for our next round of podcasts. And this, like I said, it'll be Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. And again, like I said, thanks for joining us. It's very important. And hopefully you're getting out of it. Please drop us a note if you're enjoying it. That's all we ask. Sometimes that silence, you never know if people are enjoying it. But again, please let us know.